Hi, Chad.
Hello.
Will you send me these docs?
Yes,
Who is this besides Polly?
Blake.
Oh, I only need Polly.
Okay, well,
You're reading some type of cap argument that I just need to make sure that we're good on.
exciting. Cap
I
first
know, right? That's just some ugly debates this year. Although Whitman, you said I read your ballot, was not terrible.
No, I liked it. I thought it was fine.
Okay.
Like, if it were policy, I would probably be like a little bit more picky about like some of the technical things they didn't really do.
Sure.
But like, they ran something that was relevant to the round. It didn't sound like idiots when they were doing it.
Oh, got it. I bet this debate will not be like that. So, all right, I'm going to go back over to my computer.
Okay, cool.
They finally installed the ones back there? Really?
What I'm doing is I'm thinking in terms of the nationals having better space for these students to
Yeah.
have some room.
No, it's.
And I need
Hey, if y'all want to put your emails in the chat, I can get a chain going.
Sounds good.
I think I only got one email from Polly, and I'm missing one of the judges as well. The chain.
If I need any evidence, I'll just ask for it at the end of the round.
Sorry. Okay, the chain should be sent. Let me know if anyone has any trouble getting it.
I have the chain.
If everyone has it, then we're ready whenever y'all.
1 second. I have Polly Prep speaking first on the neg, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Blake will be speaking second on the app.
Thank you. I'm ready whenever y'all are.
Okay, cool.
Send us speech off.
Yeah, I'll send everything real quick. Okay, sorry about that. My computer takes a while to copy and paste big things. Everything we read's in the chain, and then all the cards are below it. Let me know when everyone gets it, and then I'll start.
I has.
So everyone cool with me starting then?
Or I haven't gotten it yet. My computer went. Okay, yeah, I'm good. Skylar, you got it? Okay, sick.
Cool. Okay. First, let's start with framing. Educational spaces like debate must be centered on understanding the consequences of the knowledge they produce. To say that the knowledge we leave us surrounded with is the only change that can happen is true, but minimizes the stated benefit of centering around educational justice. This must come through a focused effort to resist transformation of debate into commercial space. GX 13 writes that educators need to oppose the transformation of education into commercial spheres. Learning it is best connected within imperatives of social responsibility and political agency. Educators should reject forms of schooling to marginalized students who are poor, black, and disadvantaged. Educators cannot be separated from the consequences of the knowledge that they produce. These social relations, they legitimate and the ideologies that they disseminate to students. The political economy of capitalism renders violence anonymous and normalizes systematic subjugation of millions. Our only ethical political response should be an obligation to confront capitalism and demystify this violence. Therefore, the role of the battle should be to confront capitalism. This should be the lens and the framework for which we view not just this round of ethics and politics as a whole. Zizek and Dali 04 writes that our ethical political responsibility is to confront the constituent violence of today's global capitalism and obscene naturalization, / anonymization of the millions who are subjugated by it throughout the world. The forces of capitalism seek to conceal the political discursive violence of construction, the human cost in terms of inherent global poverty and degraded life chances cannot be calculated within this existing economic rationale. Social exclusion remains mystified and nameless. 3 links into capitalism. First is that legalization switches profits from the drug industry from small farmers to big corporations, which maximizes profit at the expense of the public good. The act of modernizing marijuana production decreases public choice. Crawford 13 writes that legalization will wrest control from small producers through large economic benefits who disproportionately accrue in the hands of corporate owners and disenfranchise small marijuana farmers, leading to profit maximization at the detriment of nature. Loss of diversity, focus on yield. And legalized regime will focus on increasing breeding efforts towards strictly profit-oriented goals. Modernization of marijuana by industrial capitalism will be conducted according to the principles of efficiency, calculability, predictability, and control. Legalization is expansion of the neoliberal privatization of market. The market is only accessible to white upper class. Calhoun 2014 writes that legalization picks the winners of the weed market from those who are lucky enough not to find themselves on the wrong side of the law, who already have access to capital to invest in this expensive business. We must confront myths about the dangers of drugs and how they are needed to be controlled by those who the state deems responsible. Second, drug liberalization is an ally of neoliberalism. It's founded on negative freedom and rational choice economics. Foucault writes that neoliberalism meant that the huge black market turnover from drugs, as this represents a lost business for the legal market controlled by transnational corporations. Supporters of legalization attempt to base their argument on principles of self-determination's violation by the present restrictive legislation, identified with the classic liberal negative conception of freedom, which refers to the absence of restraint, that is, the individual's freedom to do whatever she or he wants, instead of freedom from, and not with the positive conception of freedom, which refers to the freedom to do things. Negative freedom is perfectly compatible with the existence of passive citizens, as is required by the present neoliberal globalization. Third, deregulation allows the neoliberal market to thrive, as deregulation is the central form of the neoliberal governments which reinscribe social relations based on competition that seeds the political and destroys agency. Rito 9 writes that deregulation, the central term and political strategy of neoliberalism, is not the absence of governing or regulating, but a form of government through isolation and dispersion. Everything is framed in terms of interests, freedoms, and risks, all of which offer the opportunity for individuals to opt out rather than address political problems. The abstract reduction of state prohibitions is an excuse for an increase in governing the conduct of individuals. Removing prohibitions in favor of individual responsibility creates subjects that are willing to partners in neoliberal exploitation. Lemke 02 writes that it is not a diminishment or reduction in state sovereignty and planning capacities, but a displacement from formal to informal techniques of government and the appearance of new actors on the scene of government. The alt is voting negative to self-discover and fuse their roles as individual cogs in the capitalist machine. The singular acts have the potential to destabilize all capital. Rozak at 94 writes that self-discovery is the death of the industrial mega machine. Our global economy is built upon millions of small private acts of psychological surrender. Its willingness of people to acquiesce and play their assigned parts of the cog in the greater social machine that encompasses all other machines. That capacity for self-enslavement must be broken, and the rock on which it is founded on is self-discovery. Only personal refusals to follow capitalism can lead to meaningful changes. Holloway 5 writes that to refuse to obey is to break the command of capital. Even if we don't solve capitalism, Johnson 04 writes that given the exhaustion of the social, political under capitalism, the liberation of thinking from its present constraints, and it's the first crucial step that must be taken. If anything is to be changed for the better, action must be inverted. One must resist the temptation to short-circuit thinking in favor of acting, since all rushes to action are doomed. They either fail to disrupt capitalism or co-opted by it. That's 28.
Are all the cut cards in the case too?
They're all below it in the email.
Okay.
I can do to anything specific.
I don't see the Johnson card for some reason.
Oh, my bad. I might not have copy pasted it. I thought it was the last one.
I can double check. Nothing's
think-
coming up when I command F it.
I think you've got to click like see entire message at the bottom because it's too long for like one
Oh,
email.
gotcha. Okay. Yeah, no, I found it. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone not ready? Cool. Okay. First is framework. Women come first. Our role of the ballot is to vote for the team that best prioritizes women. A, because addressing a gender-based lens is a prerequisite to breaking down intergenerational cycles of poverty. Deliso A. Gender inequality results in maternal poverty and exacerbates the old regime through child undernutrition. Gender inequality leads to a double jeopardy connected with maternal malnutrition itself, connected with inequality and deprivation. What begins as a neglect of women ends up causing adversities in the health and survival of all. But B is breadth of education. Violence against women is rarely discussed in the debate space. Our role of the ballot promotes better diversity and breadth of education. But C is depth of knowledge. Our role of the ballot forces teams to do in-depth research to identify the sources of oppression of women, which creates the tools to solve policy-making issues in the real world, according to Brown and Sandler. With that, our first contention is domestic abuse. Subpoint A is mass incarceration. The war on drugs unjustly targets women. As the Prison Policy Initiative in 2020 writes, from 2009 to 2018, the number of women in jails increased by 23%. This increase among women is largely driven by drugs. Drug-related arrests increased nearly 216% for women compared to 48% for men. As a result, the Drug Policy Alliance quantifies more than 61% of women doing time in federal prison are behind bars for non-violent drug offenses. Even though women are peripherally involved in the drug trade, conspiracy charges ensure they receive disproportionately harsh sentences. ACLU 2005, under conspiracy provisions, women are subject to the same harsh sentences as the Kingpin's current drug laws are designed to prosecute. Biden is continuing the crackdown. As Johnson 21 writes, they want to act before January 28th. Cracking down is one of the few areas of bipartisan agreement. AF solves, Erbitol 21. It would eliminate the harms and injustices associated with arresting and incarcerating drug users. This would also decrease arrests for non-drug crime. As Mirno 1 writes, by raising the price of drugs, prohibition encourages income-generating crime since users need additional income to purchase drugs. The Drug Policy Alliance in 2018 empirically confirms arrests in all legal marijuana states have plummeted since voters legalized the adult use of marijuana. The impact is intergenerational inequality. Cohen 19 writes, rising rates of female incarceration reflect disturbing social trends, a criminal justice system that exploits the poor and vulnerable. Correctional facilities exacerbate the vulnerabilities of female inmates without providing rehabilitation or treatment services needed. Upon release, female parolees have greater difficulty obtaining employment and housing, which is why Masogli et al. 14 finalizes formerly incarcerated women have 2.5 times higher odds of early mortality. Subpoint B is criminalizing pregnancy. Choi 19. State policies allow the judgment of substance use during pregnancy to be child abuse and use civil commitment statute to detain women. This deters women from seeking treatment. ACLU 2005. The likelihood of arrest and prosecution should their drug use be discovered creates significant disincentives for pregnant women to seek out and complete treatment programs. AF solves by eliminating criminalization. AF would independently expand the supply of treatment as well by eliminating the cost of incarcerating individuals for drug use. Mirror 10 quantifies it would reduce government expenditure by $48 billion annually. The Drug Policy Alliance in 2018 empirically confirms that in states that have legalized marijuana, the reduction in arrests has resulted in substantial savings, and substance use disorder treatment and drug use prevention programs are the biggest beneficiaries of revenue. Accessing treatment is key to saving lives, as Newsom in 2021 quantifies it can cut all-cause mortality rate among addiction patients by half or more. Contention 2 is violence against women. U.S. demand for illicit drugs props up cartels. Link 20. Mexico's drug trade exists to satisfy U.S. markets. As long as there is U.S. demand, Mexico's producers will find profit in supplying it. IP 21 continues. The organized crime rate has increased by 40% since 2015, and drug crimes have increased by 125%. Legalization would end this cycle. Lopez 15. Drug trafficking organizations can sustain themselves even while fighting big governments because the drug war makes drugs so expensive. Since they're so lucrative, when governments go after them, someone will always replace defunct organization. An alternative is to legalize, move drugs from the black market to the legal market, removing an enormous source of revenue for criminal organizations. This would also decrease non-drug crime, as Jenner 11 writes. Illegal investments in the drug trade often fund the arms trade and terrorists. Without the profits from the $500 billion drug industry, many of these illicit markets would suffer as well. Park 16 continues. Without prior established source of income, a DTO's ability to diversify into a new competitive market will be very slim. This is empirically true, as Gabriella 14 reports in states that have legalized marijuana, homicide rates went down. The impact is violence against women. As Kojan Muji 18 finds, narco-terrorism is gendered by way of its sexual abuses focused on women. Women suffer terrible abuse at the hands of cartel members. Narco-terrorism creates a context in which the state is unable to hold any abusers responsible for their crimes. Thus, we affirm. Do you all just want the doc or any specific piece of evidence?
Yeah, can we just have a doc?
Yeah, cool. should be sent. Once y'all get it, I'm good for cross.
Okay. Not seeing it quite yet.
Has anyone else gotten it? I don't know. It says it's sent for me.
Yeah, I got it now.
That's it.
Cool. You can take the first question.
Cool. So, why do drug cartels do human trafficking?
I don't know.
I mean,
Maybe because they have drug revenue and they can diversify into that. But we'd say mainly they don't actually do human trafficking a lot. Like they're
Okay.
drug trafficking organizations. They usually do drug trafficking.
Sure,
Okay.
but when they do human trafficking, it's because it's profitable, right? Like they don't just do it for fun.
No, I mean we would say drug trafficking organizations aren't particularly involved in human trafficking right now. But I'll take a question.
That's fine. Yeah.
So how does the neg solve for capitalism?
So, first of all, you don't have to solve for capitalism.
Okay.
We don't have to get rid of capitalism altogether. We just say that confronting capitalism is probably good because it's immoral and invisibilizes violence.
How do you?
Sorry, I'll answer your question a little bit better. Also, the best way to get rid of capitalism is for enough people to abandon it. The reason capitalism can run is because enough people silently succumb to it. Rejecting it knowingly by voting neg is a pretty good way of ending that.
Okay, so you don't have any
live streaming is on.
You don't have any post-fiat links into capitalism, right? Like the only way you break down capitalism is through your discourse, but it's non-unique to the neg world in terms of legalization versus non-legalization.
Oh, well, no, the reason we say voting neg specifically is good is because of our links into legalization. We say that the reason you vote neg to reject capitalism is because legalization is capitalist.
Okay, so if we win that legalization isn't capitalistic, then do you lose your arguments about confronting capitalism in the debate space?
Honestly, not sure. I'll probably have to figure it out later if you guys do win that.
Okay.
Let's talk about your argument on criminalizing pregnancy. So, is it illegal to drink while pregnant right now?
Yeah, but our argument is specifically that women are deterred from seeking treatment from drug use.
Wait.
Because drug use is criminalized during pregnancy. There may be other issues in the criminal justice system that we can't solve for, but solving for this is beneficial. Because
But my question is, why would drug use stop being criminalized during pregnancy? That's a child abuse crime. It's not a drug crime. It's still illegal. In states where you legalize weed, it's still illegal to use weed while being pregnant. It's still illegal to drink alcohol while being pregnant. So why does any of that change if you legalize drugs?
Yeah, our evidence from I can pull it from case, but it's specific to after legalization is happening because it's no longer a criminal penalty. Women can't be incarcerated for it, which is why they're not afraid of seeking treatment.
Just real quick before cross ends, which one is that?
I can I don't remember the author name off the top of my head, but I can find it for you.
Okay, cool. That's about cross. You wanted
yeah,
let me know.
It's Choi 19 and ACLU 2005.
Okay. Okay, cool. I see it. Claudia, you want prep?
Yes.
We'll start now. Okay, that was a minute 10.
All right. Let's see. It's just going to be straight down, starting on the framing / roll of the ballot, and then on their links. All right, let me just make sure I have all the right stuff pulled up. Okay. Cool. Thank you, John. All right. First, on the framing, there's 3 reasons why you're going to prioritize capitalism over specific identity politics. First is that Brown 93 finds that identity politics allow for the prop up socioeconomic ladder at the expense of others because progress is impossible in any other way in a capitalist society that necessitates hierarchy. Thus, their framing only furthers the oppression of other minorities. Second, your identity politics separates the masses. Class solidarity is the only way to truly solve systematic oppression. The case solves for more of the progress towards our group because the collective is better. There's no way to have systematic change without something that includes multiple groups. But third, they're just doing slice of the pie politics. Groups are just fighting for a bigger slice of the pie, but the pie is already rotten. If you're just fighting for a bigger place in an unjust, systematically unjust country or system, you're never going to end up getting rid of poverty. You're never going to end up getting rid of oppression. But on the specific arguments, first on cycles of poverty, poverty only exists because of capitalism. When you end capitalism, you end all poverty. There is no systematic poverty in a system that isn't capitalism because everybody has their basic needs met. Then there's also no education in a system, in a capitalist system, because education, first, the impact of education doesn't exist because we're going to see that people are just going to be pushed into the workforce and oppressed into the workforce, which means that even if they get an education, there's nothing they can do with that education to break outside of the system. But then second, even if there is education, it's just being educated on how to further submit to the system that we're in, which means that even if there is education, it's education that's a net harmful and teaches people to just be oppressed more. But then one more thing, which is the Brown 93 evidence concludes the root cause of mass incarceration and drug use is capitalism. The reason is because people just look for outs of the system because they're do drugs and commit crimes just because they're so oppressed and have no other outlet for to do so. But then on their specific arguments on mass incarceration, first, mitigate it. And while they're right that a lot of people have been arrested on drug charges, very few are actually charged, which is why Lopez 25 is only 3.5% of all prisoners for drug possession. And second, the problem is getting less severe for 2 reasons. First, that Juwan 18 writes that there's very little that Republicans and Democrats agree on, which is their evidence from case. But except for the need to repair the nation's criminal justice system, which is why Graham 21 finds that the U.S. incarceration rate fell in 2019 to its lowest level since 1995. Second, Week finds that decriminalization of drug use is inevitable over the next 20 years due to increasing popular support. But then third, you can turn it. Because Robertson is trying to explain that in every state that has legalized drugs, tax revenue from marijuana sales was funneled into increasing policing, leading to 166 increase in arrests in California. Yeah, let's go on to this pregnancy stuff. First, Court 21 and their own evidence from case conclude that this is not a drug crime, it's a child abuse crime, which is that even in states with marijuana being legalized, it's still illegal to do marijuana when you're pregnant. But then second, people aren't going to go to rehab as much because you're just going to normalize drug use. The Lopez 18 evidence finds that when you have it, when you legalize, it means that people are just going to be normalized for using drug use, which means that people are actually less likely to go to rehab. But then second, then you can turn it for 2 reasons. Let me find them. First is a decrease in prices. They can see that there's going to be a decrease in prices, which Calkins 11 finds mixed drugs, which means that the production is prohibited. Legalization would cut production costs in source country. Moreover, the cost of international transport under prohibition is enormous, which finds that you would see a decrease in price by 95%. And Mineta 10 finds that a 10% drop in price yields a 7 to 8% increase in demand because more people can afford it, which means that more people are going to be using drugs, which means that more people are going to be arrested for using drugs while pregnant. And then second is because Ollie 21 finds that doctors are just going to overprescribe these drugs because they're going to be marketed to, which means that you're going to see an increase in inter-partner violence because the Calkin or the Mineta evidence finds that increase in partner violence has come from increase in drug use because there's tons of people doing going into psychosis and things like that, which means you're going to see an increase in intimate partner violence and also an increase in arrests on illicit cartels. Let me find it in my doc. All right. First, the black market doesn't go away, which means the war on drugs doesn't end, which is why Toronto 19 explains that illegal markets grow after weed legalization as illegal businesses don't acquire legal licenses and still operate out of a storefront and present themselves as licensed owner. First, this is defense because cartels make the same amount of money because people will still buy their cheap drugs. Then second, it's offense because cartels increase potency to attract customers, which gets more people linked into drugs. Then second, they're just going to diversify into new businesses and new countries, like things which their own evidence concedes. You're just going to, the DEA 21 finds that all their evidence says that they're going to need an initial group of money to invest into human trafficking, but the DEA 21 or their Ling evidence says that they're already investing into it right now, which means that their own cards non-unique themselves.
Can you send a speech doc?
Some of that I was making up, but I can send you everything that I read. I can type some stuff out if you want.
That's fine. If you could send everything that you read. And then my internet cut out when you were on our case. Are you going to send the first 2 responses on the C1?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Yeah. Once we get that, we will let you know.
Okay. Give me 1 sec. Do you want me to send the stuff on the framing as well? Okay, cool. Just give me like 1 sec.
Just let us know if y'all start running prep while we find that.
Yeah, we're gonna wait until y'all send it. But once we get it, we'll let you know.
I just typed out all the response I made to the pregnancy stuff as well. And then I'm also going to do Toronto. Okay. And then here's the stuff on the framing. Okay. Cool. I just like paraphrased a lot of the responses I made. I just typed them out for y'all. So hopefully everything that I said was in there.
Sounds good. I'll tell you when I see it. Okay, I think I just got it. Is it just in one doc?
Yeah. Also, Claudia forgot to type it out, but she read that education doesn't exist under capitalism. Did you get that response?
No.
I'll type it out for y'all.
It's okay. Okay. We're just gonna call him in prep while you do that. Will you just give us that?
Wait, I still haven't gotten the doc. I don't think.
Oh, okay.
It's not a doc. It's just in an email.
Yeah, the email. Like I
Yeah.
still haven't gotten it. Okay, I'm good. I just got it. Better you call me.
Yeah, I'll call Elizabeth, and then once we connected, we'll start prep.
Claudia just sent the education response.
Sounds good. Starting. Pausing prep at 53 seconds. Can you send the evidence that you read on the framework, like the cut card version?
We only read one card, but yeah, I can send it.
Okay, cool. And then can you also send the D1 18 evidence?
Which one is that?
D1 18
From case?
on, yeah. And then, no, D1 18 from mass incarceration, sorry. And then lastly, the week 15 on decriminalization.
Okay.
Sorry, can you also send the Toronto 19 from the cartels? Okay, cool. Skylar, you want to keep taking prep or just?
I need the cards for prep, so I'll just wait until I get them.
I sent Dewan.
I'll send it to Toronto and the week.
Okay. Oh, and then they want Brown 93, right?
Yeah.
Did you have the doc open that
For Brown.
for Brown? Yeah, sorry, I don't want to. It's in the other one, the one that the like original one. Okay, all that should be sent.
Sounds good. I'll tell you when I see it.
That's two emails from me, one from her.
Awesome. Okay, we're gonna call and run like 10 more seconds of prep once we connected. Starting prep. Okay, that was 39 more seconds of prep. If everyone's ready, the order is going to be starting on framework on our case, and then frontlining, and then I'll move on to their case, and I'll address their framework there independently. All right.
Just real quick, how much was that like total? Just so I can write down.
I think we took 40 before the first time, and then 40 the second time, so around a minute 20 total.
Sounds good.
Okay, wonderful. Everyone good then? At the top, you can group their first two responses about the socioeconomic ladder and how we're picking a slice out of the pie. First off, you can turn it against them because we advocate for an intersectional lens where we unite different groups under a marginalized framework. But secondly, you can still have poverty in a world where you reject capitalism. That's why we are a prerequisite, because under this world, we are the only side that actually addresses the root cause of the issue, which is income-based poverty passed down through generations of maternal neglect and poverty. That's why you have to prioritize women. Women are a prerequisite to addressing income-based poverty. Then they say there's no impact on education because you can't get educated under capitalism. First off, we teach people how to resist systems as well, like by educating them on trafficking and cartels. But secondly, not everyone can sit in their ivory tower while their family is starving, just theorize about rejecting capitalism. Our education is more practical and real world. Let's go into the front line specifically. Will concede that decriminalization is inevitable, which solves for the mass incarceration problem. That's key because it proves that capitalism isn't broken in the status quo. Moreover, it doesn't take us out of cartels because decriminalization still means that there are no legal suppliers, so cartels are still propped up. Let's onto the turns about how use actually increases. First off, drugs are stigmatized in the status quo, and that's why users who aren't using drugs in the status quo are never going to use it in an affirmative world. But secondly, even if they do increase using drugs, it's just going to be marijuana, and that's going to substitute for harder drugs like opioids, which is why empirically we saw a 25% decrease in death in states that did legalize opioids. But thirdly, when people use marijuana instead of opioids, that actually decreases the risk of IPV because it has calming effects and doesn't cause the psychosis they talk about. On to black market and cartels. Firstly, they say there's a price differential, which causes the black market to continue. Number one, there's no link. Licensed sellers are going to outcompete cartels. Customers will always buy from a legal vendor due to its higher safety and lower risk. But secondly, there's no link. Even if it is the black market, it has less violence, and that's the Gabriella evidence they concede. It's like tax evasion in the US versus violence caused by vying of control over territories in cartel states. On the diversification argument about how they're already doing it in the status quo, firstly, they've conceded our evidence, which postdates theirs and says that drug revenue for cartels is what funds other operations, providing the money to buy guns or corrupt government officials for activities like human trafficking. But secondly, turn it, because Jenner also says that suppliers would shift into the legal framework, resolving disputes through drug courts instead of violent activities, which disincentivizes revenue diversification. But there's no link. Short-term revenue shock allows the government to gain an upper hand in the fight against cartels, leaving them no time to shift. Onto their role of the ballot. Firstly, our role of the ballot subsumes and is a prerequisite to theirs. A is because prioritizing women is the way you deconstruct generational poverty, but B is because we are using a lens that prioritizes and empowers those oppressed by capitalism themselves, which is comparatively better. Secondly, they say that deconstructing capitalism is necessary to empower marginalized people. A, their Johnson evidence about this has no warrant why change can't happen under capitalism. Their decrim overview proves that change can happen. But B, our case proves that we're beating them to the impact about empowering marginalized peoples on both of their alternatives, which are essentially the same. One, our app isn't mutually exclusive. You can create a Marxist society and redistribute wealth through legalizing illicit drugs. Two, turn it because the app does it better. Our role of the ballot centers the debate around women creating in-depth research and education to break down oppressive structures in the future. Prefer education to their solvency of moral rejection, because rejection of capitalism is imprecise and doesn't equip us with the tools to empower marginalized marginalized groups. But third, there's alternative solvencies to rejecting capitalism. For example, like we work with groups like Beyond Resolved outside, which provides resources for lower income individuals. The debate space isn't necessary for it. But fourth, capitalism is inevitable. It's in the interest of workers, and the system is too ingrained. Their own Zizek author writes in a 2012 update that there's no limit to how far critiques go. The goal is to democratize capitalism, but optimists left expectations turned out to be a sobering moment and dangerously short-sighted. The primary effect of crisis is not the rise of the radical left, but racist populism, wars, and poverty. The first reaction in a revolution was not panic, but rather the ingrainment of the ruling ideology. On the case level specifically, on the first link, firstly, you can turn it because the existing system is already profit-driven. It's just successfully high cost through the black market. That is neoliberal as well because there's no regulation by the government at all. But second, turn it. The prison system, second turn it, because our link is literally wealth distribution by the government through treatment centers. That is by definition anti-capitalist. But third, the opioid crisis is the neg world, and that proves that without the current regulation and status quo, big pharma is thriving and it's actually more neoliberal. At that point, group their second and third link about privatization and neoliberalism. You can turn it because the divide between the state and federal policy harms regulation efforts, which creates the high profit environment. Half for G21. The persistent divide between national and state policy present numerous challenges. An uneven regulated for-profit industry that generates high profits and maintains substantial control over marketing, promotion, and product supply. Ultimately, their world is more neoliberal because there's less regulation.
Get a doc?
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay, it should be sent. Are you good for cross?
I want to make sure I get it first.
Sounds good. The front lines aren't in there, but if you want specific cards for the front lines, I can send them to you.
Oh, okay. Probably then, yeah. Can I see this? I don't know. I could give you specific names, but it'll be easier if I just say like the last three frontline cards.
The last three frontline cards. Do you know what arguments they're on?
On cartels.
Yeah, on cartels, do you read that revenue shock leads to government winning the fight in the short term?
Oh, that was analysis.
Okay.
The Jenner card from case, and then also the uniqueness about 50% coming from drug revenue is the first front line if you want that. Both should be in case, so I think the cards
yeah,
are
I don't
but I can just tell you the author names.
If you read any new cards frontlining cartels, I'll just like
everything on cartels is already in case.
That works then.
Okay, sounds good. Did you all get the speech doc?
Yep, I did.
Awesome. All right.
You can take the first question.
Thank you. All right. So best case scenario, you win the round. Oh, and we affirm, like we put in legalization. What happens for women?
What do you mean? Like are you talking about in a world of legalization? Or in a world where we win the round?
Best case scenario for women. Like I'm a woman. What happens?
I'm confused. Are you asking about what happens in a world of legalization for women or in a world where we win the round?
Both.
Okay, in a world of legalization for women, like that's just their case. Like cartels fall apart. There's no longer a need to do human trafficking and conduct atrocities against women. Violence decreases. In a world where we win the round, not talking about the resolution specifically, this encourages and facilitates education around women. It provides us with the resources and in-depth research to actually deconstruct structures in the real world outside the debate space. Can I take a question now, though?
Sorry, can I just ask a really quick follow-up?
We spent like 45 on this already, and I answered your question.
Though, because I'm confused because that doesn't seem to be deconstructing a system. That just seems to be talking about deconstructing a system. So what's the difference?
You're also just talking about deconstructing a system. No, the difference is that we have more in-depth and precise education on it.
The difference between ours is that like Marx's first step in creating a revolution is individual rejection of
and the first step in deconstructing systems of oppression against women is educating individuals on what causes them.
Well, not
I'm going to take a question now. We've spent half of cross on this. Okay. So how are you like what individual means outside of rejecting capitalism, like in your head, are you doing to deconstruct capitalism? Like what movements have you engaged in?
So like outside of like me personally, like outside of the round?
Yeah, you personally.
Oh, like how am I deconstructing capitalism?
Yeah, what have you done? Have you bought from small businesses? Have you engaged in social movements?
Yes. So I've done all this.
I just want a few examples.
Jonah, my partner here, is the founder of Communist Club at Poly Prep Country Day School.
unionize the teacher.
Oh yeah, and we're unionizing the teachers at our school right now. We got our calc teacher. Me and Jonah are in the same calc class. We got our calc teacher to start a union, so that's fun.
Not like all.
Why?
Okay, you can take a question.
Okay, cool. All right. So you say that deconstructing like cycles of poverty based on gender is a prerequisite to solving for capitalism. But I'm just a little bit confused because if poverty exists because of capitalism, then how can you be a prereq?
Our argument is that, okay, so your argument and how you deconstruct capitalism is that you unite individuals along an income-based line, correct?
That's one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, so our argument is just that in order to unite individuals along an income-based line, you have to look at it through an intersectional lens because that allows, because that essentially like maternal neglect and stuff like that is a
100%. But what's more intersectional than literally class consciousness? Like you're only talking
No, our
about.
argument is that purely class consciousness is not enough because certain groups are more oppressed under a framework of just class consciousness. So you have to take into account an intersectional lens. For example, you have to take into account women because that's the prerequisite to class consciousness. That's the end of cross.
Okay, we'll start some running prep. We used, how much did we use? We used the minute 10 before, so we'll run a bunch now, starting now. Okay, that's the prep. I'm going to be starting with the K, then their case. I'll like signpost when I'm talking about framework and stuff. Everybody good? Okay. Let's start by extending case. First, the framework, the political economy of capitalism renders violence anonymous and normalizes systematic subjugation of millions. Through creating an economic hierarchy, the workers blame for their own suffering. Educational spaces like debate must be centered on understanding the consequences of the knowledge they produce. That's our Zizek evidence. The role of the ballot is that the political economy of capitalism renders violence anonymous. So the role of the ballot is to be to confront capitalism, demystify these violence. The link we're going to go for is a Crawford and Calhoun link, which is that the drug industry becomes industrialized and corporations take over from small farmers, creating drugs based on profit motive instead of public good. They give you a couple, the alternative is that every person in this round individually rejects the role in a capitalist society by voting neg to reject legalization, which is inherent in capitalist policy. Only through this individual recognition of our oppression can we reach class consciousness. That's our Howard evidence and our Johnson evidence. They give you a couple of responses. First, they just tell you that poverty, first they just tell you that you can do both. We're going to explain why capitalism is always going to be the starting point for all talk of other systems of oppression. That's because our Bernazoli and Flint evidence tells you that Capitalist society functions to maintain its hegemonic melting pot of cultural values by necessitating guised and benign criticism of its actions while allowing the system to go unquestioned. This produces the flexibility it needs to justify its existence to the masses and perpetuate the existing order. In order to gain and maintain support for a large standing armed force, those who do not necessarily have a lot of stake in the well-being of the system must be somehow convinced that its health is of critical importance to their own well-being. Society must be accumulated to generate a certain level of acquiescence. Hegemony is the ability to set agendas and define values and norms. Ideas are disseminated to wide audiences in order to justify them and make them appear normal while belittling alternative views. Their identity politics is just liberal reformism. They're trying to tell you that helping women is going to solve capitalism, but you cannot solve capitalism if you're working within the system. Their own role of the ballot, and the reason they say the role of the ballot is important is so you can have better policymaking going forward, but policymaking does not lead to any solvency there. That's because liberal reformism always fails, because just means you pacify the masses instead of actually starting large-scale change. Working within the system can never destroy the system. Masters tools, whatnot. They give you a couple of responses. First, they just tell you that they give you a couple of other responses. First, they just tell you there's like alternate solvency for capitalism, but the way that we're solving capitalism is by rejecting capitalism specifically within the. Otherwise, you're affirming capitalist ideology and helping capitalism. So this isn't a real response. Then there's Zizek evidence tells you that optimism leads to like counter-revolution and stuff, but they don't link this in specifically to our case. Voting neg doesn't lead to any revolutionary optimism. It leads to people abandoning capitalism. We're not saying that you have to do revolution. We're saying that you have to abandon capitalism, like theoretically. Then they just give you a couple of responses on our link specifically. They tell you that the black market is profit-driven, but the government stops the wide-scale mechanization of capitalism, leads to the profit motive being prioritized over the public good, which is what a lot of small weed farmers do. Then they just tell you that wealth distribution is anti-capitalist, but like Marx did not advocate for a big welfare state. He advocated for changing the means of production. It's not anti-capitalist at all. Then they just tell you big pharma is thriving. That isn't a turn. Let's go to their case. Couple of responses here. First of all, on their argument about cartels, the DEA evidence goes drops, which is that they're already investing a lot into drug trafficking. Their evidence only says that they need initial investment. They've already made that initial investment, which means that when you legalize drugs, you just see them going into other areas of illicit revenue. That's literally their own evidence from case, which tells you that they're going to make more money by doing human trafficking. They'll just abandon the drug trade altogether. Go next.
Can you send DEA?
Yeah.
Okay. Once we get that, we'll let you know and start prep.
Oh, shoot, my bad. I tagged that wrong. It was NBC. DEA card or something.
Okay. Wait, y'all didn't cite NBC in round. I don't know if you're allowed to do that.
She just said the wrong like 3 letters. It's the
I know,
same-
but like in your speech doc, it's DEA.
Okay. Do you want me to send it anyway? I mean, we'll just.
Sure. I want to send that. I want to see the evidence that you all read in round, which was DEA.
Yeah, he literally just said the wrong 3 letters.
They didn't read evidence in round. Like it's fine. You're not
Okay.
allowed
Yeah,
to
I guess it doesn't matter then. Can you just tell me the date on the NBC card?
It is April 29th, 2020.
Okay, so we're gonna call and start prep once we get connected. Starting. That was a minute 15 of prep.
Okay, it'll be going framework, our case, their case. Our role at the ballot is to vote for the team that best prioritizes women. First, extend the prerequisite. A gender-based lens is key to alleviating poverty because if you don't prioritize women, that perpetuates intergenerational cycles of poverty through maternal neglect. They say that capitalism is the root cause, but they've conceded Schuyler's analysis that poverty exists without capitalism, which means only through a gender-based lens do you have a chance of solvency. They also say liberal reformism fails, but we aren't working with the system through, we're changing it. Their own argument about decriminalization proves that reform can succeed. The second warrant to extend is that centering the debate on marginalized groups incentivizes teams to do in-depth research, which was the third warrant we read in case. This is better because policy testing how to help marginalized groups equip staters with real-world skills for deconstructing inequality. They've conceded Schuyler's analysis that blanket rejection of any capitalism is imprecise, which doesn't achieve this. This outweighs on time frame because the only way to deconstruct systems in the long term and have practical real-world skills to reject oppression is through our role of the ballot. Then go to our case, go to cartels. They extend one response, but they've really mishandled Schuyler's front lines. They just say that they'll diversify. Number one, strike this response from your flow. They literally could not provide a single piece of evidence to back in the round. You can't call for the evidence. They never read it in a speech. But secondly, they've conceded the Jenner and Park evidence, which tells you the only reason drug trafficking organizations can fund these operations is because drug trafficking itself is so lucrative. When that goes away, when you legalize, they can't do these other things as well. But thirdly, they concede Schuyler's third front line that this is just that short-term revenue decline is sufficient to allow the government to get an upper hand to squash cartels. All of this outweighs the argument on probability because they've conceded that violence empirically goes down in states that have legalized marijuana. At that point, extend our argument. Prohibition in the status quo raises drug prices and allows cartels to operate with impunity in the black market. Legalization shifts the operators from cartels to the legal market, which cuts off their revenue. That's really good, as cartels perpetuate sexual abuse against women, which destroys their mental and physical health. Then go to their case. The first thing to extend is that we can subsume their role of the ballot because we also have discussion about oppression and underlooked groups, which rejects the status quo. But secondly, they've also conceded that there's other methods of creating discourse to reject capitalism outside of the debate round. That was the concession in second crossfire. At that point, there's no unique reason to vote neg. But thirdly, they mishandled the Zeka evidence, which tells you that capitalism is inevitable because it provides good profit incentives for workers. It's too ingrained in the system, so it's never going to be overturned. At that point, voting neg is never going to achieve any change. But finally, they've cold conceded the term Schuyler reads on their second and third links that the only reason why you see for-profit and a commercialization of drugs like marijuana in the status quo is because there is a state-by-state patchwork framework of regulation, which means the government can't do anything to stop for-profit companies from intervening in the market. Only through uniform federal regulation in an app world can you solve this. This was conceded, no new responses in that speech, even if you want to vote on their capitalist framework. Because of the term, we have a better hope of stopping capitalism through increased government regulation.
Okay, good for cross.
Yeah, for sure. Y'all can start.
So, like, our second and third link is all about how deregulation is neoliberal because it allows people to be governed by competition instead of by the government. So, you tell us that decriminalization proves that capitalism can be reformed, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
So, isn't this just another way of deregulating industry, which is,
No.
pretty good for capitalism?
The Hafergy evidence was conceded and really explicit on this question. Basically, it told you that the reason why capitalism and like big companies or like commercialization, which is your first link, is happening in the status quo is because the federal government has no authority to intervene in like cannabis markets. But when all drugs are legalized, like the FDA and government institutions can actually take over and enforce uniform regulations, which stops like the rampant commercialization and lack of safety that you talk about.
But that's a pretty small impact compared to the rest of the drug market that isn't legalized. Like just because a few states have legal marijuana and there's commercial industry there, there's a lot of industry.
No, our argument is that in a world where you have blanket federal regulation, there can no longer be commercialization.
Yeah.
It's not that like, it's like both that you overturn the existing commercialization and that because there's blanket federal regulation, there will not be commercialization/industrialization in the app.
But isn't your link the case that there's a big legal commercial market which takes out drug cartel revenue?
No, it's not legal and commercial. It can be like smaller businesses or local dispensaries, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, Okay, that's fine.
I don't know if anyone noted. I wasn't there for a lot of the summary. My
Well,
power cut out. My power cut out 41 seconds into summary.
Oh,
uh,
probably. Did you hear the roll of the ballot responses? Like,
Yeah, the last thing that I have are the roll of the ballot responses.
like the second one about like education or like depth of knowledge and research.
Yeah, like the last thing that I heard was about working like with minority groups gets us more like precise education.
Okay.
The third response on roll of the ballot.
Do you want me to just like redo the rest of it then?
That's up to you all. Whatever you all would prefer.
I don't think there's another option. You just, like, go ahead. It's like, don't like add a whole bunch of analysis, but like,
Yeah, I would. You can call me out if I.
I know you want. Just, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. I understand. Okay, so you said I was 45 seconds in, so I have 2:15 left.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
wait, are you redoing your speech or are you just gonna like tell Chad?
No.
We could just like tell Chad the responses. I don't know. It doesn't really matter.
I feel like it'd be fair to just redo the summary because otherwise there's like no time limits and like it seems more like.
Yeah, that's fine. Just like, redo the last little bit of your summary. That's
Okay, sure. Sounds good.
We'll let you know if we think that's something to do. Or something.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. In that case, anyone not ready? Extend our third warrant of framework. Our role of the ballot centers on marginalized groups, increase more depth of knowledge through incentivizing teams to do in-depth research on marginalized groups. This is better because policy testing on how best to help marginalized groups equips debaters with real-world skills for deconstructing inequality, which is better than their role of the ballot because blanket rejection of any capitalism is imprecise and doesn't create real change. But then go to our case on cartels. They just extend one response that there will be diversification happening. Number one, strike it. They never read evidence for it. At that point, you can't call for any evidence later in the round to back it. All of our card analysis outweighs. But secondly, they've conceded the Jenner and Park evidence that tells you the only reason why cartels can do these other operations is because they have massive funding from the drug trafficking industry. At the point when we get rid of that in the AF world, they can't fund these operations. But thirdly, they cold concede Skylar's last front line that even a short-term drop in revenue is enough for the government to gain an upper hand and quash cartels. No new responses in the next speech. All of this outweighs their argument on probability because they've conceded the Gavriola evidence that empirically violence has gone down in states that have legalized marijuana. Extend our argument. Prohibition raises drug prices in the status quo, which allows cartels to make a lot of money and operate in the drug trafficking market. Legalization shifts production away from violent black market actors to the legal market, cutting off their profits and ending drug trafficking. That's really good, as cartels perpetuate sexual abuse against women, which is terrible for their mental and physical health. Then go to their case. First, extend the fact that you can do both. Our role of the ballot subsumes theirs because we do the same thing their evidence talks about in terms of discussing oppression and overlooked groups in the status quo. But secondly, they have conceded that you can also discuss and have discourse about deconstructing capitalism outside of the debate space. It's not necessary in the debate round at all. But thirdly, they concede that capitalism itself is such an entrenched system that it can never be deconstructed. Our evidence is super explicit on the warranting level. It says that it's so ingrained and gives a profit incentive to workers, which is why it can never be changed. At that point, there's no impact to just rejecting capitalism. In the neg world, we have a better probability of solvency. But finally, extend the turn they concede on their second and third links. The only reason why you see commercialization in states right now is because there's no federal regulation and there's loopholes in the state market. However, when you legalize at a federal level, the government can enforce regulation and stop big companies from entering the market. That takes out their first link.
Cool.
You want to do like another, I guess, minute and a half across then?
Sure. Or wait, Chad wasn't here for the first half, right? So should we just redo it completely, or?
I mean, it's
I don't really care that much.
Okay.
To be honest.
Yeah, I guess we could just do a minute and a half. Doesn't super matter.
Okay.
Okay.
So I guess we'll start now. Can I have a question? I guess. You tell us that you're like changing the system, right? like on your first response to the burn is only infinite evidence. So are you changing? You're changing. So I guess how are you changing the system then? Like what mechanism?
Through
By-
getting like mass incarceration and eliminating cartel violence.
And
Ah.
also, under our framework, we're changing the system because we're creating in-depth research and education that equips us with the tools to deconstruct policymaking in the future.
So how?
And
Like,
it also doesn't have to be policymaking because the research that we get can also function in like our day-to-day lives. So for example, like with the education that we get on cartels, this helps individuals like better identify human trafficking victims. It helps them like get at the structures that prop up violence against women and the status quo.
wait, sorry. So if
And
not
then-
just policy making, then like, can you be a little bit more specific about the
I feel like the last example I just gave. It teaches individuals how to, for example, identify human trafficking victims because we have in-depth research and knowledge created from the round, and that is a structure that deconstructs violence against women outside of policymaking.
Okay, gotcha. Y'all want a question or?
Do you want to take one, Elizabeth?
Sure. Okay, so how does your evidence say we're supposed to reject capitalism? Just by like looking at overlooked groups, or what specifically? What's the warrant?
So it says that you need to reject capitalism on face because it's an immoral system, and by doing that, you abandon the reins of capitalism,
Okay.
and you stop like mentally subjugating yourself, or like quietly succumbing to capitalism, which is what drives. Okay.
Great. It's gonna be. Let me open my computer so I can extend case. That'd probably be great. Okay. It's gonna be extending the K, then frontlining the K, then the F. Right? Is everyone ready? Cool. On framework, the political economy of capitalism renders violence anonymous, normalized into systematic subjugation of millions through creating an economic hierarchy. The worker is blamed for their own suffering. Educational spaces like debate must be centered on understanding the consequences of knowledge they produce. That's the role of the ballot. It should be to confront capitalism, to demystify this violence. We went through the Crawford Calhoun link, which says that industry becomes industrialized when you affirm, which means that corporations take over from small farmers and create drugs based on profit motive instead of for the public good, which is why the alt is that every person in this round individually rejecting their role in a capitalist society. Only through individual recognition of our oppression can we reach class consciousness. The first and most crucial step in creating a Marxist society. Only when we come to individual conclusion that we exist in a society where the worker is meant to suffer can revolution truly happen. That's the next alt. Let's talk about frontlining. First, they say that they're changing it and there can still be reform because of decriminalization proves that, but that literally is our Benzoli evidence. The evidence is very clear in saying that small victories, like small amounts of education, like legalization, can quell ideas of revolution in the minds of the people because they think that there can be reform under the system. Our argument is that you can, by affirming, you're reigniting the fact that there can be reform in a system that inherently oppresses and renders violence of millions of people invisible, which means that they're literally linking into our K with this argument. That's the evidence that Jonah reads. Then they say that they also have rejection, but they don't have rejection. They're just talking about overlooked groups without rejecting an entire system. Just because you talk about women doesn't mean that you're rejecting the system that oppresses women in the first place. Then they say that there's other ways to do so, because we're doing it outside of round. First, not for the people in this specific round. Our argument is that each individual has to individually come to the conclusion that they're being oppressed. But then second, they also do the same thing. They literally say that they're in beyond resolve. This round matters. We both agree to that. Then they just say that capitalism is inevitable. But first, even if that's true, the most moral thing to do in an immoral world is to reject capitalism. That's the alt. But then second is that even if that's true, the reason why it's so ingrained is because of these small victories that they're propagating. Our argument is that when you have these small victories like education, like legalization, that's why it's so ingrained, which is why we all have to recognize that these small victories do not prove that the system is reformable. Let's go on to their side of the flow. We're also winning here because they say that they best prioritize women. But first we say that we have vast solvency for the millions of people being oppressed because there's a decrease in poverty, even if there's some poverty still. Then they say policy testing is imprecise. But our argument is that you shouldn't be precise, you should be general and take down entire systems. Then other argument about illicit cartels, we also winning here because the MBC evidence finds that they're already doing the initial investments that they need. There's not going to be a decrease in profits. There's not going to be a decrease, any short-term decrease in profits because they already have the original investments, which is what their evidence says.
Okay, we're gonna call around the rest of our prep. Starting. All right. Order is going to be starting on their case for the K, and then onto the framework, and then onto our case. All right. Everyone good? Okay. On their case, they have conceded a turn into capitalism, which means they lose the round. They have conceded that the only reason commercialization, industrialization would happen in an affirmative world of legalization is if there is state-by-state regulation. However, the AF causes a blanket federal regulation, and that's key because it means that the AF actually causes regulation that deconstructs the commercialization that's happening in the status quo. That means that the AF is a comparatively better rejection of capitalism. So even if you want to vote off of the capitalist framework, you're voting for us here. Let's go into the framework debate. Firstly, we told you that you can deconstruct capitalism outside of the debate space. There are own examples during second class proof, and this means that it's not necessary to tie the ballot to a moral decision that rejects capitalism. Instead, you should tie your ballot to topic education about women, because only in the debate space are we able to be incentivized to do in-depth research about violence against women under our role of the ballot, which is how you learn to stop violence against women in the future. This means that the only tangible benefit off of the role of the ballot comes from topic education around women. But B, we told you that it's fine if revolution is quelled as long as there are tangible benefits for women, like deconstructing human trafficking. That's key because it means that we're winning the framework debate. But secondly, they've conceded that a Marxist society will never be achieved because of things like profit incentive for workers, the fact that the capitalism is already too ingrained, and the fact that crises in the past have just deepened capitalism. That means that their moral rejection is at best a little nice cushion for their soul, but it doesn't actually do anything because it doesn't deconstruct capitalism in the wrong one. That is another reason our role of ballot is preferable, because it is the only role of ballot that has tangible benefits to women, that actually educates us on how to stop violence against women in the future. Let's go into our case then. We told you that violence against women stops in our world because you cause cartels to lose profits as a result of shifting it to like small owners in the affirmative world. That means that most of their revenue is decked, and that allows the government to crack down on cartels, which stops cartels, human trafficking, and violence against women, and their rampant sexual abuse. They extend one response about how cartels are diversifying at 2:02, which is way over time. So one, strike out off your flow, but two, I'll respond to anyways. We frontline this by saying when the government is able to get an upper hand from the short-term revenue loss, this allows cartels to be stopped. At that point, I frontline the only response on our case. They've dropped a turn on the capitalist argument, and we're winning the framework debate. There's literally no cleaner place to vote except for us.
Good round, y'all.
Yeah, great debate.
Good round. Thank you to both teams.
Good round. Thank you.
Thanks.